So Wendy, let's talk about this lovely book.
Yes. Well, let me just pull up my notes. As I was not able to find out a lot of information about the author, and so I was really glad that I was able to see your interview with her. It really filled in a lot of the questions I had about what's been going on in her life. She read Spanish at the University of London and was a teacher. She taught English. She taught Spanish and English, and she also later became, her most recent tenure has been a principal. So it's interesting. We in Carolyn's discussion with her, she talked about the fact that, or Carolyn said, well, a lot of the book was written from the perspective of being in a classroom, and I think it's that's something she knows well, is how people react within students. She has a variety of nonfiction books, and I really suggest, if you have not seen the interview, please do. She seems like a lovely lady and had a lot of interesting things to say, both about the book and about Cordoba. So other than that, I don't have a lot of information. Carolyn, is there any highlights you want to touch on the author herself?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you're going to cover this, Wendy, but one of the things I was interested in is I knew that Cordoba was from her own experience, but I was also curious about the motherhood theme and whether that was out of her own experience, because some of us have had interesting experiences with our mothers also. And so I was just curious, and she said she had the most wonderful mother, and even the book, what's the name of the book, Wendy? I can't remember what the different mothers.
The Rainbows Raised Us.
Yeah, that was, Wendy and I both wondered if that was a real book. And it's not. That was something that she created as well. She said her mother was, I said, was your mother a kind of like Blue Mother? And she said, yeah, she probably was a little like Blue Mother. So, and she is working on another book that she's I'm sure she'll let us know what that one's about. And she told me her daughter was in Cordoba, or going to Cordoba soon. And then she provided a whole bunch of tips on things to do, like going to the patios and when to go, which she said this spring would be her choice, kind of May, April. So lots of fun to talk to her. I felt like I think we talked for 25 minutes, and we had already talked for 15 minutes before we hit record. So it was very easy to talk to her about things. She was quite lovely.
So I usually start with my favorite passage of the book, and I'll just say, as Carolyn indicated, I really like the book. I couldn't put it down. I read it over a weekend. Which means I had to go back and refresh myself on what was happening. But my favorite part, I think, was when she went with the family, with Bridget's family, to the beach. They're on vacation. And she says, Bridget's mother hitched up her dress and paddled in the sea. My heart jolted, because she was exactly Blue Mother in The Rainbow Raised Us. At the edge of the sea, laughing, the wind in her hair, and her blue children around her. Us. How I love being us and not me. I think all children only dream of us. And I really, when I was reading that section of the book, I really was on the beach with her. And I was a little girl, thinking how wonderful it was and how we were all together and doing these things. And it really captured my heart. And then they sat down and had a great picnic with moose and different things. And at the end of that section, she says, I just couldn't be happier at this moment, could you? Some days heaven touches earth. And do we notice it at the time? Or do we know it later when heaven is snatched away? And I liked that passage a lot. That's like kind of my favorite section of the book. But there were several other sections that I equally liked as well. So what about you? What are some areas or types of parts of the book that you enjoyed? First of all, did you like it? Yes, no, Yeah. Okay, good. So we've got a lot of yeses. What were some of the parts that you enjoyed about the book? Any favorite passages or sections?
I have a short passage that I picked out. I usually forget to bookmark them, but this time I did. It was just, there was a lot of talk about Bridget being fat, and I don't really know how fat Bridget was, but from the time she was a child, she was marked as fat. And quite often, people would say to her, the narrator would say to her, "Oh, you'll always be beautiful to me," which I felt was a bit of a pat phrase. It was a bit of a throwaway phrase. So this one, this phrase that I just really loved, where she was describing Carrie and Bridget walking together. And she says, "It felt so good looking at them together. Spindly Carrie with her wispy plaits, blonde again, and her too big kimono, arm in arm with beautiful Bridget, her pale porcelain face, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders, her lovely balanced body curving in and out like a Greek vase, bare feet flat on the stone floor." And I thought that was just beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And it's interesting that you brought up Bridget, because one of the things that I found in the book is that this book was about Ava, but there was another story about Bridget going on all the time as well. And they were both longing for something. And in fact, the author talks about where she got her idea for the book came from this idea of longing and yearning for something that we don't know if we have. We don't know if it's because we've had it in our past and we miss it, or it's because we don't have it. So I'd like to explore that longing a little bit. Ava was what do you think she was longing for? I mean, clearly she was longing for that mother's love, but and what that represented to her. Bridget had a different type of longing, right? Bridget had that familial love all the time, but she was longing for acceptance of her peers. She always, she was chasing after a boyfriend all the time. She longed to have a love in her life, whereas Ava had loves in her life all the time, but she longed for the family. So you have two different people who are filled on one side of their life and empty on the other side of their life. And so to me, Bridget was an interesting side note story, having from a young child been fat and felt taunted and felt different, and how at the very end, she was, basically this whole idea of she just wanted a man, right? And whereas Ava was like, yeah, don't worry about it. But that's what Bridget was longing for, was that type of love, as opposed to a familial love. Did anybody else see those parallels at all in the book? In terms of,
although I found Bridget very outgoing in the beginning.
yes,
when Ava first comes to school, and she just sort of takes her under her wing, and they become instant besties, and I thought, how lucky for Ava to have met Bridget,
Right. One of the things the book itself goes through, it's really a whole circle of life thing, right? And it starts out with her being young and wanting a mother, and ends it with her helping to raise a child who's longing for a mother. But along the way, Ava has very significant people into her life. And Bridget was the first. Because, and so Bridget was not a mother figure, but she was a loving family figure. She was like a sister to her. And then came Bridget's mother. So before we talk about Bridget's mother, I want to talk about the rainbow who raised us. As I said, I went online to see if there really was a book, because I wanted to read it and look at the pictures. But just to kind of refresh your memory, there were several mothers described. The first was the blue mother. And the blue mother was free and open, and she speaks from her heart. The green mother was full of hope and healing. The gold mother had a golden garden, and she was constantly welcoming children into her garden with treats. The gray mother sat among rickety bookshelves and maps and atlases. And the pink mother was delicate and feminine. The purple mother was dutiful and proper, and the yellow mother was busy and hardworking. So my question to you is, when you were reading the book, did you think about your mother and where she fit in these categories? And I mean, or did you think about yourself and how you as a mother or a mother surrogate would appear to someone else? So thoughts on the colors and how you describe them. I mean, I would love to think I was a blue, but I probably would be the gray mother with the books and the maps and the atlases, because my living room, if you saw it, it's all full of atlases and maps, but and globes. But or perhaps I might be more of the I don't see her here, the one that's proper. That's what I thought. The yellow mother who is proper. Oh, no, that's the
Gold mother, maybe.
Beautiful and proper, because I tend to say, okay, you toe the line. So I'd be that combination of purple and gray, which is probably not a very appealing color choice for children, you know.
I feel like we need a turquoise mother in there, a blend.
Yeah. But I think that, and even as the author pointed out in her discussion with Carolyn, she drew these pictures of mothers, or the concept of the pictures of mothers, so that Eva could have a way to be able to distinguish that her mother was different and what were the types of mothers. And so to have these colors made it very easy. Bridget's mother. What did you think of Bridget's mother?
Bridget's mother was wonderful.
Yeah.
And she was, I think, a typical blue mother, you know, very blue in terms of being, you know, heartwarming and speaking from her heart. But prior to her even going over to Bridget's mother, I mean, she knew Bridget's mother, but her first mother was her father's wife. Thoughts on the father's wife, who she thought was her mother, who was very distant from her.
So after she turned 3.
Yeah, after she turned 3. Right. Did you think something weird was going on with the mother? The fact that so much was hidden about up to age 3?
I thought she was, just a distant, absent mother with issues until the picture with the head cut off. And then I knew, okay, there's definitely something going on here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I figured the picture with the head cut off must have been the nun or the mother. And I think the idea that I felt very bad about poor little Eva, who needed to take a childhood picture, a baby picture to school, and not having a baby picture to take, and having to try to pawn off her father's picture as her own.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking, and I think we do that unknowingly. As a school teacher, I became very much more sensitive to that kind of thing. When you asked students to write about something or to bring, in high school they don't bring things. There isn't show and tell, but even in writing, you have to be so sensitive about how you frame those assignments. It's heartbreaking.
Yep. Because I think, one of the things as a child, we all think our lives are sort of normal, even though they're all very unique. I was reminded of that recently. I ran into a woman I went to school with, and she told me now that, how terrible her father was hitting her, abusing her mother and abusing her. I was like, how did I not know this? Because she seemed to come from a normal family. She thought she was coming from a normal family. She didn't realize until much later what conditions she was living in. Because as a young child, you just don't see those things as being different. They are your parents, right? So she went from her father's wife, the mother after age of 3, who then that mother was put away for a while, taken to get dried out from her drinking. And she stayed with her grandparents, or her grandparents came to stay with her. Thoughts about how the grandparents were with her, and how did they nurture her or not nurture her, or what was their relationship like?
I think she was just a duty to them. I mean, they upheld their duty in the way that they saw they were responsible for. They provided for her financially when they needed to, paid for things that she needed. But I don't think that there was any bond between them. And I guess at the time that doesn't make as much sense. But with what you know later, perhaps they just never really did see her as their grandchild.
And if you think about it too, those are the parents that raised the mother.
Yes,
who was an absent mother, right?
Yes.
So generationally, you had that disconnect of affection and caring and loving relationships. So that may be part of it too. So the grandparents, their duty was done, and they pawned her off on Bridget's mother to take care of her. Let's talk about when she was living with Bridget. What was her life? How had her life changed once she lived with Bridget?
She was part of the family.
Let's see, Peggy first?
Yeah, she was part of the family, you know. She was part of a group, you know. Much, you know, not a single oddity in the house, you know. She belonged.
Yep. And Sally, you had something going?
It was probably the only time in her life where she wasn't yearning for something she didn't have. She had what she wanted when she was there. Mm-hmm. And she was much more conscious of it than the blue siblings, because the blue siblings, I mean, that was just their mum and what they were used to, where she was analyzing every gesture from blue mum.
Yeah.
And every moment was fulfilling something in her that she needed.
Yep.
But at the same time, she was aware it wasn't really hers.
Right. And one of the things that's interesting, you say that seemed to be her coming of age area, and that's where she sparkled in that time frame, I thought. And that's why it was so tragic when the blue mom passed away. Hopefully you all read this and I didn't just throw something out that you didn't know about. But when the blue mom died, and it's interesting because I looked at how it impacted her directly, and how it impacted, again, I look at that parallel with Bridget. Bridget took her mother's death quite differently than Ava did, because Ava had only a chance to touch it, and then it was gone. And then to make matters worse, Bridget, her best friend, was pulled away from her. So now she was like without a blue mother, without her best friend, and just sort of rambling. And I figured, unfortunately, that was probably like her middle school years, her early high school years. What a time to be going through that kind of stuff. You know, just in a normal, well cared for family, those are tough times anyway. And to have that happen, to have your best friend gone and the woman who you really looked up to be gone.
The father was gone too.
I was going to say, I also.
Yeah, Elizabeth, yes, or Beth.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I think it was also hard on her because she had idealized that family, the blue family, so much, and to watch them all just sort of disintegrate and sort of fall apart without blue mother, that I think that was just really shocking for her too, to watch the whole family grieve and sort of come undone and to some extent because of the death.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. She really did idolize the family, and that she viewed them as being the perfect family with no issues. And of course, every family has issues. Even the ones that are doing well have issues. So it really was a chink in their armor, for sure. And somebody else had a comment on that.
Oh, I wanted to say that most of Bridget's problem was because her father fell apart, and she had to take responsibility for the family.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. You know, to lose your mother and then have to also take responsibility for the family. It's too much.
Yep. Well, so then so she kind of did a little bit of time with her grandparents, a little bit of time with her mother again. And then the next mother to come into her life was Michael's mother.
Mhm.
Michael, the boyfriend. Yes, Dina.
I think she had Jean though too in between there, didn't she? I mean, not necessarily a mother, but that was the closest. That was the person that was there all the time for her, giving her advice.
Yes, yes.
So, okay.
Yeah, so you're right. They weren't just adult women. There were other people in sort of filling those cracks. And later on, I see, like, for example, Carrie, her roommate in Cordoba, was a mother figure of sorts as well. But let's talk about Michael's mother. Does anybody remember anything about Michael's mother, or the impression she may have given you? I thought she was definitely a purple mom, prim and proper. One thing that stuck out to me about the mother, the part that I remember the best, is her mother said, "What is guiding you?" Which is an interesting question to ask your son's girlfriend. What is guiding you? And that's when she took time and she thought about it, and she said, longing. She's being guided by her longing. Now, she didn't say her longing for what, but she just said that longing. So I want to ask, have any of you, I realize that I'm longing for something. I'm not sure, but I can't put my finger on what it is, but I'm never quite there. That's why I move, because I'm trying to find that place, But, so has anybody else been guided by longing? Earnestly searching for something and moving your life in directions to try to get to that place. And I said, I know I am, but I have no idea what it is. If I could make it more concrete, then maybe I could settle down a little bit. But so there's this yearning to do something. And some of us yearn for travel, right? Don't we have a longing for travel, a longing for adventure? Some of that is part of our guiding light. But hers was longing for family, longing for that family, love of a mother.
I think, Wendy, like for me, I think the longing is maybe just connecting and feeling connected to other people, especially right now, because it's something we've lost a little bit during the pandemic. So it's a really interesting idea to think about this question, because it's kind of deep. I'm kind of wishing I had a glass of wine so that I could, get more in the zone for this. But yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it's something, we may want to take some of these questions and journal on them afterwards and come back and share what we learn, because these book discussions, that I think what I enjoy about them is they cause me to reflect a little bit, because we're not just talking about a book or a place. We're oftentimes talking about our own lives and what this book has meant to us, not just inspiring us to travel, but also what are we learning from this book that will help us become better people. So maybe we want to think about that and talk about it on the next call.
Because I think, the longing, I think part of it for me is probably, and I'm trying to think of the last time that I felt totally this way, like every day for weeks at a time. And that was when I lived in Canada. And it had nothing to do with Canada, but it had to do with the fact that I had a very close group of women friends. Now, I was 40 at the time, so it's been a long time ago. And most of these women were between 28 and 40. There were about 13 of us, and we did everything together. We'd go camping together. We were always constantly, and it was that real connection, very, very tight group of friends that you knew they were always there. And, if this one couldn't come, somebody else, you had an entire network that you could fall back on. And yes, I'm getting that to some extent through JourneyWoman, which is great, but I also want that in my house. I want that in my neighborhood. I want that in my, so that from day to day I can pick up and go see friends and do things. So that's maybe what I'm longing for, is that connection, being fully connected all the time. I'm not sure. But
looking for your tribe.
Yeah, I'm looking for my tribe. Yep, exactly. And I think finding it gets harder the older you get. I'm close to 70 now, and it was much easier when I was 40 than it is today. So, and so now as we go through the next sort of group of people that are mother figures, but they're not necessarily mothers. The first one I brought up was Carrie, who was her roommate in Cordoba. Mm. And I really thought that Carrie filled in some of those mother pieces. First of all, they were very close. They were best friends, but Carrie also sort of took her under her wing, and tried to protect her and tried to help her and tried to show her the way. And so any thoughts on Carrie in terms of their friendship and how that fulfills some kind of a mother type relationship?
Carrie was the one that kept changing the color of her hair?
Yes.
Okay. I liked her.
Yeah, she was a character. She's the one who finally tracked down the place, the house.
Church. Yeah.
Yep. And she really did a lot. I think she really went out of her way in terms of being a friend. I don't know whether she was doing it just out of the friendship or because it was kind of exciting to do it, But she really did quite a few things. And then after Carrie, then we have Sister Anna.
It was an absolute delight.
Yeah.
I loved Sister Anna.
And Lorenzo, right?
Yes.
Her
yes,
dancing
I'd
partner.
love to know that story. We'll never really know, will we?
And it's interesting that I think Sister Anna knew right away what the situation was. When she showed her the picture, I think it was, right away that she knew exactly what had happened. And Sister Anna was kind of a character, right? She was probably the only one still living there. So she was getting up in her age, and she seemed to be a bit eccentric. But she did fulfill a certain thing. Then came the biological mother, Yasmin. So what were your thoughts about when she first met her? What were her expectations about meeting her? And did those get fulfilled immediately, or did it take time?
Oh no, can you imagine Yasmin, she had this child out of wedlock and she didn't want anybody to know, She got on with her life and had another family, and yeah.
And Mary?
But yet I think it's interesting because Yasmin bought her a present for every birthday. Yeah. And I thought, so the two parallels, one is, she in her own way was dealing with this. Mm-hmm. The mother was, and so when she asked Ava if she would ever call her mom, and Ava says, "Well, I'm not ready," and it was interesting seeing them work through the relationship.
But they did, and that's what was important. I mean, it wasn't immediately. I think it didn't meet her expectations at first, but I think they grew to figure out how to have a strong relationship going forward.
But it was never the relationship, I don't think, that Eva expected at first. I mean, Eva's expectations were unrealistic expectations. They were a child, even though she was now an adult, she had a child's expectations of what would happen. And at the beginning, she resented that Yasmina didn't sign her letter mom. Mm-hmm. So there was an interesting sort of cycle that went on there in Eva's relationship with Yasmin, because at the beginning she was desperate for Yasmin to be that mother, that blue mother. That's what she wanted. And then she got to know Yasmin, and I'm very conscious that Yasmin was also in a very unhappy family relationship, so was very conflicted about what was going on. By the time Yasmin got to the point of, as you said, Mary, saying, "Can you call me mum?" By that stage, Eva had backed off completely. And I think when they finally did find a very lovely relationship together at the end, it wasn't a typical mother-daughter relationship.
No.
There was love, but it wasn't a standard kind of idea of what a mother-daughter love would be.
I think it's interesting too, because it is a love, and I wonder how much what we expect the mother-daughter relationship to be as adults is is colored by the fact that we grew up with them. You know what I mean? In other words, have you ever thought about if you had met your mother as an adult, what would your relationship be like with her? Not having had any history as being a child with her, but if all of a sudden you met her as an adult, you know, what kind of, how, you know, which is what Yasmin did. You know, they met as adults. And that's a very different thing than if you've grown up with them and you have all sorts of expectations, all sorts of past experiences that have colored your relationship. And to not have that is a little freeing. You know, even if you've had a good relationship with your mother, it could be freeing in a different way to meet them as an adult. I've often wondered what it would have been like to have met my parents as adults. I'd like to even just have known them as adults, but I unfortunately didn't get to meet them as an adult. But yeah, to have that relationship, and it was not a typical mother-daughter, not at all. What about Bridget becoming a mother? And or what were your thoughts on that? Bridget she wanted a family. And I wonder if it was partially because as a child, she had such wonderful thoughts with her mother that she thought that would bring back some of those wonderful things if she had a child herself. Or if it's because she really wanted to have a male love in her life. And but she definitely, that was the direction she wanted to go. What do you think of the rest of the family? And I call them family, Carrie and the sister and everybody together that worked as a family unit. In the end, they were a family living in the house. And they decided to take care of Bridget's child. And I think it kind of took it full circle. Any other thoughts on those kinds of things before we talk about Cordoba itself?
I think that Bridget is such an interesting character, like from the author's point of view of how she handled Bridget, because Bridget was absent for most of the book, and she wasn't just passively absent. Mm-hmm. Her absence was her very absence, almost like a character. You know, the lack of Bridget in Eva's life was so significant, and I just admire how cleverly that was done. That she was absent, but she was always present in our thoughts as well as Eva's thoughts. Mm-hmm. We were always waiting. I was always waiting for that letter from Bridget that didn't come.
Yeah. Yep. So now my question is, who here has been to Cordoba? I know Carolyn has. What about Spain? Who's been to Spain? So, did reading parts of the book make you want to go check out Cordoba?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Any book that makes me reach for a Google image search is a successful book. And I did it a number of times.
Yeah, I did the same thing. Yeah.
I wanted
to see the mosque.
Yep.
I was wishing that the postscript was at the front, because when I read it at the end, I thought, wow, I mean, I could have, woven some of that into the nun walking around, or the different, some of the different characters in Cordoba, because Cordoba didn't enter it until a ways into it.
Yeah.
So.
I think it entered in the beginning as a thought, it was because she was from there, but in terms of us going there and walking the streets and seeing it, it was quite a bit later. Yeah.
When I was listening to Carolyn's interview with Joanna, I enjoyed it so much, and I just wanted to get up and start packing right away. I was just getting so geared up. I mean, it just sounded like such a splendid place. And I must say, I really enjoyed this discussion, and I'm very frustrated with myself because I haven't read the book. I have this dreadful bias towards nonfiction, memoir, biography, whatever. I find human behavior so fascinating. I mean, I've worked in the mental health field for years, and it's my privilege to interview clients and hear their life story. And I mean, I often think I'm getting paid for this. So I'm frustrated when I'm reading fiction, because I'm thinking everyone's life is so interesting. Why does somebody have to conjure up a story? So it's my own personal bias, which is not serving me well. So although I'm not contributing, I haven't read the book, but I'm so enjoying the contributions that everyone else is making. And your questions, Wendy, are really very, very interesting. You know, it gives us lots of pause for reflection and introspection and so forth with our relationships with our mother and my daughter and so forth. So
and I constantly, you know, throughout the book, I was thinking, so for example, just, you don't know this, but my parents died before I was 23. So I have not had an adult figure. So when I was reading the book, I was thinking, well, have I picked people? Have I done that? Who are those people in my life that have served as mother figures and helped guide me? And so I was constantly looking at that as well. Not only like what was my mother, but who were my mother figures? And how have my friends played into that covering and that of love that you get from the family? You know, it's so I think it was to me it was a very self-reflective book, but it was also just a really good story. You know, and it was there were parts when I didn't want Bridget to die. I was like, no, find a cure. I didn't want Blue Mother to die, but yeah, there was I thought it was very interesting, very well written, and I'm looking forward to her next book. But pardon?
So if anyone hasn't read the postscript, because I know it comes after the acknowledgements and a lot of people just don't get that far. If you haven't read the postscript, it's just such a lovely immersion in life in Cordoba, don't you think, Mary?
It is.
Yeah.
So I do recommend you going
I
back.
said I really want to go.
Yeah, because it's her life in Cordoba.
Yes.
It's her, you know, what she was like when she thought as a young woman in her 20s. So I think there was, you know, the mosque I definitely would like to see, the gardens, and it just sounded beautiful. And there's sometimes it's the garden, the festival of flowers, that's once a year. That sounds like it would be just wonderful to go see. Karen, what were some of your favorites?
If I could give some advice on this,
Yes.
because I've been to Spain about 20 times, and some of my favorite cities are right in that area. Seville is very close, and the great thing about Spain is you just take the train and you get around everywhere. It's very easy. Cadiz is another city not too far away, and I also went from Cadiz to Jerez de la Frontera, up to Seville and Cordoba, and I'm thinking that Toledo, because everything comes and goes from Madrid, right? So you could come down and you could go back up on the train. And I've also been, of course, Granada is in that area, Malaga. I would skip Gibraltar if anyone ever asked me, hands down. But that whole part of Spain is really, Ronda is another place.
Yeah.
Like that whole part of Spain is worth spending some time in. And I think I've stayed in Seville about 4 times, and I never get tired of it, because even, you know, there's certain places you can go in the world, and I think you can go to the same places over and over again, and it still feels new and exciting. For example, I go to Westminster Abbey every time I go to London, and I just like to go and sit in there and go to the writers' area and imagine what it would have been like, you know, hundreds of years ago. So, and I find that part of Spain is very much that way. And I was in Cordoba for 2 or 3 days, and it was not enough. The mosque just takes your breath away. Not only is the building astonishing, it's enormous. So it takes up it's the whole center of the city. And then of course they put walls around it. And then Isabella put this church in the middle of it, which is just, I mean, it's wrong, I guess, but it's just this, it's beautiful without it is what I mean by that. But it's amazing. It's just one of the most, I mean, I don't know. I loved it. I wish we would have stayed longer. I was there in December and the gardens weren't in bloom. So I agree with Joanna, try and go in the spring when the gardens are in bloom. And they also have these incredible horse stables there. They're very well known for the horses. And not to mention the patios and all the things that she talks about. So it's just one of those cities I would definitely suggest you go to, along with the others.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, any other comments, thoughts on the book in general?
I wish I had read the at the end first. I wish I knew that she didn't have that distant relationship with her mother because I didn't. So I have to be honest, it took me a while to get into the book and into the story. But I'm so glad I did once I did it, because it has so many more layers of, it's not just about, her mother and,
Right.
a mother-daughter relationship, but so much more. But yeah, I enjoyed it very much. Going back to your longing question, for me, longing for travel, definitely. I grew up in a small town in Tennessee, and so I long to see the world, and I have seen a lot of it, except for Spain. So now I can't wait. I've got to make plans. But I also had a longing for home, because I lost my parents when I was in my 20s, and my mom especially. So that was very hard and shaped me as a person and my life. And I was blessed. I had a wonderful mother. So I've been thinking a lot about that question of when I have to say this, that when my mom was getting ill, and because she and I had gone to Europe, and that was my first time anywhere, and she and I went together, and then she got sick, and so we had talked about going to Australia, and at some point when I finally graduated college and I was on my own, and I decided to go, and so it was without her. And so I've been thinking about and journaling and writing about that experience and how kind of grieving for my mom more properly, more deeply or something, but also how that trip to Australia changed me. So yeah, I'm really loving this book club, and I'm so inspired by all of you and how you've traveled so much more than even I've dreamed.
Well, you have plenty of years ahead of you to do so.
Oh, yeah.
Older than I look. So, but thank you.
Writing about losing someone can, and especially in the context of travel, for those of us who are travel-minded, to write about travel and how travel makes us think about people who aren't with us, you can bring so many more truths out that you didn't even know you knew. So yeah, write it. It would be my advice. It might surprise you in many ways.
Yeah, it has so far. Thank you.
And Carolyn, do you have anything to say about our next month's book?
Well, first of all, Wendy, thank you for facilitating such a beautiful discussion. And I always enjoy your questions. I thought these were quite profound. So you must be in quite a reflective mood this evening. I'm really going to dwell on this question of what would you think of meeting your mother as an adult? That's giving me lots to think about. So yeah, fabulous discussion, and thank you everybody for participating. Our next book is Carol Drinkwater's All My, no, that's not right. An Act of Love. And I'm about a third of the way into that one, and it's a very nice book to read as well. So we'll be talking about that next month. And of course, she is, Carol's very well known for her Olive series. All of her books take place in Provence. And I think she's written 3 or 4 books on in fact, Tina Hardis and I from TripFcitio did a little Instagram live on Saturday and talked about this book a little bit, but it takes place in 1943 and during the war. So it's a nice story. As I say, I'm only partway through it. Has anyone read it?
Not yet.
It's on my doorstep right now. I just watched the man deliver it.
Wonderful.
That's great. And the third book we're reading also I think will be quite lovely, about Cyprus, which is a part of the world I don't know too much about.
It's beautiful there.
But it looks like, I think that takes place in 1974 and is in the time period. Cyprus was, as I understand it, part of the UK, or at least UK Commonwealth territory, and then declared independence in 1960, and then 1974 there's kind of a partition between one part of the country and the other. So I think it'll be very interesting to learn more about Cyprus. We have also been working on our books for the next few months, which we'll share soon. We're just in the process of picking the third. So we're trying to do 3 at a time so that you have time to order them and read them and if need be, share them or whatnot. These are newer books. So do let us know if you're having trouble finding them. And as I said, we can always share and send books around. I don't mind doing that at all. So those are the next few books, and we'll stick with our Wednesdays, I think, for the time being. And I just want to mention we have next week we actually have 2 other events coming up. One is about developing a travel mindset, so thinking about how to manage fear and anxiety when you're traveling, and how you can kind of control your own experience a little bit, in as much as you can, around how we think of travel and stay optimistic. And I'd really encourage you to come to that. That's with a wonderful life coach, Debbie Phillips, who I interviewed a few weeks ago. She's also speaking at our Women's Travel Wisdom Conference in our retreat in October. And I felt like I was telling her my whole life story just talking to her, because she's such a wonderful listener and so supportive. So that webinar with her is on the 22nd, and we have a community call, which is on Thursday next week at 2:00 Eastern, 11:00 Pacific, with Mara Lee, and we're going to be talking about women who inspire us and just looking for some sources of inspiration. And then we have another webinar. I'll just tell you, this one is in March, and this is about travel advisors and trying to understand a little bit more what travel advisors do and how they can help us, and answering questions about insurance and travel regulations and things like that. So we're trying to line up things that will help us prepare to return to travel when we feel like it, when we're ready for it, but also give you, kind of the right skills to do that. So if you ever have ideas or suggestions or anything, please let me know. I'm always keen to hear what you think. And we look forward to seeing you at one or all of the next couple events. And if not there, then on our Facebook group, or give me a call, or anything at all. So just want to stay connected to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so we'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wendy.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.